43. The time for member statements is also concluded. Questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Acting Prime Minister. Does the Morrison government take responsibility for real wages going backwards, workers being paid below the minimum wage, cuts to penalty rates and wage theft? Won't Australia's lowest paid workers always be worse off under the Morrison government?
The Acting Prime Minister has a call.
Well, under the Labor government, 17% funding cuts to the Fair Work Ombudsman's office, 20% staffing cuts.
Acting Prime Minister. Just say to the Acting Prime Minister, he wasn't asked about alternatives. He was asked several questions, I have to say, several questions, and certainly the last of those is very open-ended, but he needs to be relevant to the question. The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
And the relevance in this question, Mr Speaker, relates to jobs, relates to workers. And there are more workers in a job now than there ever has been in Australia's history. The employment numbers are higher now than they have ever been in Australia's history, and that's a good thing. And the Labor opposition should stop talking down the economy. The Labor opposition needs to talk the economy up.
The Acting Prime Minister can resume his seat. The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Mr Speaker, on relevance, the question was about real wages, people being paid the minimum wage, cuts to penalty rates of wages, wage theft. It's all about wages and the fact that this government is seeing real wages go back.
I'm also going to say to the Leader of the Opposition he's accurately restated 4/5 of the question, but not the last part, which was very open-ended, which about people always being worse off is kind of open-ended, so there is some latitude in that. I call the Acting Prime Minister.
The unemployment rate is lower now than when it was pre-pandemic. And wages are important, yes. And the important thing too, obviously, thank you for the acknowledgement.
The member for Bruce will leave under Standing Order 94A. The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
Popular choice.
People want work, they want hope, they want aspiration, and they are getting it under the Liberals and Nationals. Indeed, prior to the onset of COVID-19, the economy was on a very, very strong foundation. The government had delivered more than, wait for it, 1.5 million jobs. And wages relate to jobs. Wages relate to jobs. And I tell you what, I'd sooner have a job than be unemployed. The best form of welfare is a job. In regional Australia at the moment there are 67,500 jobs. 67,500 jobs as identified by the Regional Australia Institute. And they're not just in orchards, they're not just in boning rooms of meat processing plants, they are in health, they are in education, they are in law firms, they are in accountancy practices. They are good, well-paying jobs at the moment in regional Australia. But right across the nation, we are putting in place the policies, as per the budget last October, as per the budget on May 11, to incentivise employers to hire people, to pay them the wages. And we are under the same wage structure as those that the system that was set up under Labor. And under Labor, the Fair Work Ombudsman's office had its staffing slashed, had its funding slashed. Treasury forecasted the unemployment rate to reach 7.5% in the March quarter 2021. And now Budget 21-22 sees the unemployment rate reaching 5% by June quarter 2022. And there are other countries in the world which would love to have those figures. Jobs figures will be out later this week, and the Treasurer will be having more to say about that, but it will be very positive.
Just before I call the next question, the Acting Prime Minister will cease interjecting. Members on my left who regularly interject will be ejected. I'm not going to keep referring to the statements I've made. I call the member for Flynn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is also to the Acting Prime Minister. Will the Acting Prime Minister inform the House how the Morrison-McCormick's government's free trade agreements are supporting the economic recovery in regional Australia?
The Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the member for Flynn. It's 10 out of 10 for what happened at number 10, Downing Street that is. Today is another historic day in our trading nation's history. We are a trading nation, and we know that trade equals jobs, and more trade equals more jobs. Indeed, I'm very delighted to inform the House of the new free trade agreement agreed to by the Prime Minister of Australia and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The Australia-UK free trade agreement is not a deal at any cost. It's the right deal for Australia. It's the right deal for the UK. It's a two-way partnership between two great nations. Long-standing friends, a $36.7 billion arrangement about to get a whole lot bigger, about to get a whole lot larger. This FTA will have a significant benefit for Australia, and particularly, especially, notably for Australian farmers. We should be all very proud of Australian farmers. They are the best in the world. Make no mistake, and because of them, we can have the confidence to negotiate strong trade arrangements with the UK and with any other nation. Our farmers, our food producers will get greater access to the 68 million customers.
Will leave under Standing Order 94A. The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Australian products such as beef from the member for Flynn's electorate, as well as wine and rice, sheep meat, cheese, sugar and a range of other commodities will have greater access to the lucrative UK market. Australia, as I say, has always been a trading nation. We produce substantially more food than we can consume domestically. Australia presently has 15 FTAs in force. 9 of those FTAs have come into being since 2013, and we've a further 8 FTAs under negotiation or about to commence. I say well done to the Trade Minister for what he has been able to do, along with the Prime Minister and a whole host of other ministers and government departmental officials to clinch this historic deal. Yes, Dave, yes, the Minister for Agriculture. What a great job he's doing. And his electorate of Maranoa, as large as it is also going to benefit, along with the member for Flynn's and every other regional member. Indeed, every one of the 151 members who sit in this House are going to benefit from the Australia-UK FTA. This financial year, $47 billion worth of our agriculture products will be exported around the world, and that's to get a whole lot bigger right now thanks to this deal.
The Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. As of today, less than 3% of Australians are fully vaccinated against COVID. When will all Australians who wish to be vaccinated be fully vaccinated?
The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
Well, I'm going to ask the Health Minister to add to my remarks, but there's more than 6 million vaccinations have already been done. That figure was reached this week. And only yesterday I spoke with Saul Resnick from DHL, whose company is transporting via trucks the vaccinations right around regional Australia, and that is significant. Well, more than 24 million kilometres DHL have travelled to make sure that those vaccinations reached regional destinations. And I am very proud to say that the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and I acknowledge the Regional Health Minister and the involvement that he had with this, is also making sure that those vaccinations get out to remote communities. 80 communities, 30,000 people. I'll ask the Health Minister to add to my remarks.
The Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And our expectation and our objective is to ensure that every Australian who seeks to be vaccinated is given that access this year. That remains our intention, and indeed that likelihood continues to strengthen as the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, we have now passed 6 million vaccinations in Australia. Yesterday was 152,000 vaccinations. It was the highest Tuesday. It was the second highest day that we've received so far, and that is a very positive sign in terms of Australians stepping forward to be vaccinated. I want to thank all of those that have come forward to do that. In particular, what we have also seen is that we are now at 62% of the over 70s in Australia, or 1.8 million and a little bit more, that have been vaccinated, and 45% of the over 50s, just under 4 million, and we expect to pass that 4 million figure during the course of today. So 6 million Australians, 6 million vaccinations have been delivered. Last week we saw record weekly days on average. Significantly, we passed 5 million Australians who have had their first doses 2 days ago. Now we have passed 6 million total doses for Australia. And in addition to that, what's very, very important is that we are seeing Australians stepping up around the country. And I want to thank them, to respect them, and to thank all of our health and medical professionals who are assisting in the program as we continue to vaccinate the nation, with an expectation that in the next 24 hours we will pass 25% of Australians who have been stepped forward to be vaccinated.
The member for Goldstein.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer inform the House how Australia's strong trading performance with the Morrison-McCormack government's new free trade agreement with the United Kingdom is helping to consolidate our strong economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Goldstein, a former Human Rights Commissioner, passionate about super and a fierce opponent of Labor's $57 billion retiree tax.
That's
Mr.
right.
Speaker.
That's right.
Labor's $57 billion retiree tax. Now, Mr Speaker, more trade means
Members
more
on
jobs.
both sides.
1 in 5 Australians
Member for
work
Goldstein
in a
is
job
about to be ejected when he
related
asked his own
to
question.
Trade. 1 in 5 Australians work in a job related to trade. And that is why the Coalition has pursued more bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, including trade agreements with Japan, trade agreements with Korea, trade agreements with China, trade agreements with Indonesia, trade agreements with Hong Kong, trade agreements with Peru, the Trans-Pacific Partnership 11 Nation agreement, Mr Speaker. Now, those agreements are helping to drive more jobs across the country. It's also helped sell more beef from the Birmingham, Mr Speaker, more dairy from Dennington, Mr Speaker, more wine from the Barossa and indeed the Margaret River, Mr Speaker, the Margaret River. And what we have seen is that Australia's current account surplus has increased by more than 14% in the March quarter to more than $18 billion. That's 8 consecutive current account surpluses, the longest run on record, Mr Speaker. And today we're very pleased that we've been able to secure a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. And well done to the member for Wannon, Mr Speaker, the Trade Minister. Well done to our Prime Minister. Well done to our Ag Minister. Well done to our DPM, Mr Speaker. Well done to all those involved in helping to secure this deal. A deal with Australia's 5th largest trading partner, a deal with Australia's 2nd largest foreign investor, a deal with a country who we have shared more than $30 billion in two-way trade. And this deal will see 99% of Australia's good exports enter the UK economy tariff-free, Mr Speaker, once this agreement comes into force. It will help cut red tape. It will help the movement of workers across our 2 great countries, Mr Speaker. It will help Australian businesses in the professional services sector build on the success to date. Indeed, we've seen more than $700 million of professional services exports in the year 2019, Mr Speaker, more than 13% of our services exports. So this deal will help create more jobs across our two countries.
The member for Rankin.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. The government's budget assumes there will be a one-week lockdown in Australia every month for the rest of this year. Hasn't Treasury been forced into these assumptions due to the government's failures on vaccines and quarantine?
The Treasurer.
I thank the shadow of a shadow Treasurer for his question, Mr Speaker.
The Treasurer will withdraw.
I withdraw, Mr Speaker. There haven't been many questions that have come my way from the shadow Treasurer. Now, the reality is that the budget had a series of assumptions in it about, as the shadow Treasurer said, about lockdowns. It also has a series of assumptions in it, including the vaccine rollout, as well as the gradual opening of the international borders from mid-next year. But what we understand in this budget is that we have put in place policies that take into account that the pandemic is still with us, including $41 billion of COVID economic support measures, including tax cuts for more than 10 million Australians, Mr Speaker, including immediate expensing provisions and the loss carry-back measures that have been extended for another year, that have helped see machinery and equipment investment up by more than 10% in the last national accounts, right across the country, including extended the skills programs, including $15 billion of infrastructure spending. These are the measures that account for the fact that there could be further lockdowns, that there could be further outbreaks, that the fact that the pandemic is with us. But what this budget says is also that the unemployment rate will come down over time, Mr Speaker. And there's an expectation by the next year we will see unemployment come down below 5%. And I point out to the shadow Treasurer that today unemployment—
The Treasurer will resume his seat. The member for Rankin on a point of order.
Thank you, Speaker. Relevance: lockdowns, quarantine, vaccinations.
The Treasurer has the call.
And I've referenced, Mr Speaker, and I've referenced the fact that we are rolling out the vaccine. I've referenced the fact that there'll be lockdowns, and I can tell you I can also reference the fact that in the budget we put nearly $500 million to increase the quarantine facility, Mr Speaker, in Howard Springs. And the reality is this budget was predicated on the fact that the pandemic is still with us. And that is why we extended the LMITO, Mr Speaker, the low middle income tax offset, a temporary measure. That is why we've extended the immediate expensing. That is why we've extended the skills program. That's why we've extended and expanded the infrastructure project, and that is why we are seeking to drive the unemployment down. But what is an inconvenient truth for the member for Rankin is that under us, unemployment today is 5.5%. And even after the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression, the unemployment rate today is lower than when we came to government, Mr Speaker, and that more than 900,000 jobs have been created since the pandemic started, Mr Speaker, and that more people are in work today than when the pandemic began, Mr Speaker, and that our economy is bigger today than when the pandemic began. These are the inconvenient truths for the member for Rankin.
Concluded. And I call the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources, Water and Northern Australia. On the 28th of May, in Senate estimates, the government advised that only 100 gigalitres of water would be estimated to be recovered through efficiency measures. With water buybacks now ruled out, exactly how will the government secure the remaining 350 gigalitres committed to the Murray-Darling Basin Plan?
The Minister for Resources.
Well, can I thank the honourable member for their question? Mr Speaker, the first thing I'd say was we are not giving up. We are not running the white flag up the flagpole. There is 3 years to run. I've got billions of dollars to put towards the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and we intend to deliver on it. That is our commitment. We will deliver on it. So, Mr Speaker, I think it's important to recognise what's been done already. There has already been 2,029 gigalitres of gap-bridging water against SDLs recovered. That is 97.8% of the water required to meet the SDLs under the Basin Plan. 97.8%. We have spent over $9 billion of a $13 billion commitment. We have delivered a $270 million Murray-Darling Basin Community Investment Package just last year, which is rolling out as we speak, Mr Speaker. We will continue to deliver on those commitments. Now, Mr Speaker, I'm asked particularly about the streams in terms of off-farm infrastructure funding in terms of recovery. We have unequivocally ruled out further buybacks. Buybacks are bad for regional communities, they are bad for our irrigation centres, they are bad for not only business but the individuals that live there. And we have unequivocally ruled out further buybacks. We will not be buying back more water, Mr Speaker. I am once again giving that commitment. But what we are doing, $1.33 billion moved to off-farm projects. I have been advised that that could recover up to 150 gigalitres per year. That is the advice that I have. And, Mr Speaker, they can also participate on a smaller on-farm initiative, around $60 million. But these are significant projects that improve efficiencies, that recover water towards the plan, that will absolutely ensure that we deliver on what we said we would. Now, Mr Speaker, there is time to run, there is money to spend. We are in negotiations continuously with the states and territories because, quite simply, Mr Speaker, quite simply, we are part of a plan along with other state and territory governments and communities and stakeholders. We are working hand in hand with them to deliver what we said we would. We have made significant progress, particularly over the last 12 months. We have commitments from New South Wales. They have put forward their water resource plans to the MDBA for assessment. That is a significant shift in recent times. And, Mr Speaker, we will continue to do what we said we would. That is the bottom line. So, Mr Speaker, we know that we must continue on the journey around the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. There has been significant progress. It has made a significant difference not only to communities but the environment, and it is our intention to keep doing that. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Yes, before I call the next question, I welcome to the Speaker's Gallery the President of the Legislative Council of South Australia, the Honourable John Dawkins. Welcome to question time. The member for Bass.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment. Will the Minister please update the House on yesterday's historic announcement that Australia and the United Kingdom have in principle agreement on a new free trade agreement and what this means for Australians?
Great question.
The Minister for Trade.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Bass for her question, and I know as a farmer that she'll be thrilled with the announcement of this historic FTA agreed in principle by our two Prime Ministers overnight. The most comprehensive FTA that we have negotiated with any country apart from New Zealand. It's ambitious, it's liberalising, it's comprehensive. And not only that, it covers goods, it covers services, it covers investment and government procurement.
Members on both sides.
And for Australia, especially Australian agriculture, there are outcomes across the board. When it comes to rice, when it comes to sugar, when it comes to dairy, when it comes to lamb, when it comes to beef. And this agreement has been widely welcomed across the board. The President of the National Farmers Federation, Fiona Simpson, said, "We applaud Trade Minister Dan Tehan and our negotiating team on improved set of market access outcomes. The UK deal will create new opportunities
Members
for Australian farmers as we work towards growing industry output to 100 billion by 2030. That was very nice of Fiona, wasn't it? Very nice of Fiona. The Australian Sugar Milling Council...
Pause for a second. I know it's difficult, but members need to try to contain themselves. The Minister has the call.
The Australian Sugar Milling Council said this is a positive outcome for Australia's sugar industry. Sunrise Chairman Laurie Arthur said it's not an overstatement to say that this is the most significant market access outcome for Australian rice exports in any of the recent free trade agreements that the government has delivered. The Australian Dairy Industry Council said concluding this FTA will now mean that Australian dairy manufacturers will be in a position to actively explore market opportunities that they would previously have never considered possible. Meat and Livestock Australia. This outcome not only enhances the long-term partnership between the British meat trade, British consumers and the Australian red meat industry, but also signals a strong commitment by both governments to the merits of delivering free trade,
The Minerals Council of Australia, the Australia-UK FTA, will help establish reliable and responsible supply chains for new technology materials such as lithium, providing mineral and metal inputs to support advanced manufacturing, highly skilled jobs and the global clean energy transition. Mr Speaker, this is a world-class free trade agreement. It rights a historical wrong when the UK turned to Europe 50 years ago. It means the partnership between the UK and Australia will grow, it will enhance, and most importantly, it will create jobs. It will create jobs in this country.
Move an extension of time for him. Move an extension for him.
The member for Franklin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. The New South Wales Agriculture Minister said about the horrific mouse plague, "It's incredibly disappointing to hear the Commonwealth admit they've got no national response and throw their hands up as our regions face this problem. Why is the Morrison-McCormack government abandoning farmers when they need them most?"
The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
We are looking after farmers when they need us to look after them most. And overnight, of course, if you haven't realised, Shadow Agriculture Minister, we've signed a historic UK-Australia free trade agreement that is really going to look after farmers. Now,
Acting Prime Minister, the Acting Prime Minister could pause. Members on my left will cease interjecting. Members on my left, the Leader of the Opposition, the question was very specific and it wasn't about trade. The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
The question also asked about what are we doing for farmers, and we're doing a lot for farmers, and we will always be the parties for farmers. The Nationals and the Liberals will always protect the interests of farmers. And indeed, I have spoken to Adam Marshall, the Agriculture Minister in New South Wales, on many occasions, and we stand ready to assist in any way we can, provided, of course, he puts the request in. But I have to say, Shadow Agriculture Minister, have you been to northwest New South Wales and seen the devastation caused? And it might behove you to not come into this place when you move your motions, smiling all the way about these farmers who are doing it very, very tough at the moment. And I live in a community where they are ravaged as well by mice. And there is nothing worse than the stench of mice. There is nothing worse than having mice eat your grain. There is nothing worse than having mice running rampant around your house, around your farm, around your factory. And then we have, of course, PETA, the people for the ethical treatment of animals, coming out. I didn't hear the member for Melbourne disendorsing them, saying that the mice, the poor little curious creatures, should be rehomed. Well, I actually agree with PETA. They should be rehomed into their inner city apartments so that they can nibble away at their food and their feet at night and scratch their children at night. But this is a disgrace by PETA. We always stand ready to help our farmers, and the APVMA, they are considering a request for certain pesticides and herbicides. It's called the bromadiolone to the bait. But the trouble with that bait is that it also does have secondary influences on native birds and other animals, pets around the house, and indeed livestock. And that's what we don't want to see, but what we would always do is take the best possible advice. In this case, the APVMA. Farmers know who their friends are. The friends are on this side of the house. Farmers always know. Farmers always know. And this has always been. What about Adam Marshall? Well, states have always known that these sorts of things are the remit of states. They are addressing the issue. They've added $100 million to their $50 million original program to support those mice-ravaged farmers. I'm sure that the New South Wales Coalition Government will go on supporting farmers, and if we're requested for any assistance, we will certainly take it into consideration.
The member for Kingsford Smith can now leave under 94A. Talk about missing the moment. The member for Nichols has the call.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Drought and Emergency Management. Will the Minister outline to the House how the Morrison-McCormack government's historic Australia-UK free trade deal will strengthen our economy by delivering more jobs and business opportunities to Australians through increasing export opportunities for agricultural goods, benefiting Australian farmers and regional communities?
The Minister for Agriculture has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Nichols for his question. And he, above anyone else, would know the importance and the gravity of last night's UK free trade agreement. It's a historic agreement, as you say, Deputy Prime Minister. And what it does is builds on the other 14 free trade agreements that we put in place that are supporting Australian agriculture. And it's quite fitting that that agreement was signed last night, because today ABARES has finalised Australian agricultural export numbers, and it's to $47 billion. And the exciting thing of this is that they are now estimating for next year, despite not having signed the free trade agreement with the UK before this, they were saying that it will go to nearly $50 billion next year. And that's why we're continuing to put support around our exporters to be able to do it simpler and easier. Digitising our export systems so that they can do it easier, getting rid of physical certificates, making sure that there's only one application. But we're also putting more boots on the ground. The 22 men and women in high commissions and embassies around the world getting market access. And can I say to the Agricultural Councillor in the UK, thank you on behalf of the Department of Agriculture, on behalf of farmers, working with the Trade Minister and DFAT officials. They were at the forefront of ensuring that this free trade agreement came to fruition. That is the real investment that has been made that is getting real results for people on the ground. And they need to understand they are making real results and they are changing people's lives. And the perfect example of that is to go to Central Queensland and to look to the story of Blair and Josie Angus living just west of Rockhampton. They were impacted when the high-quality beef quota was taken away from Australia and given to the US. But instead they continued to invest in their product, and instead they decided to invest in a new abattoir on their property west of Rockhampton, not just producing beef but processing beef to send it into the UK. And what this agreement means is that we have now gone from just over 4,669 tonnes to now have a quota, tariff-free, to 35,000. That actually underpins their business model. That is underpinning the jobs, the real tactile jobs that are going to turn up in central West Queensland, the real jobs that will drive regional and rural Australia. Because of the 334,000 Australians that are employed in agriculture, 3 in every 4 of those are related to trade. And what this has done is put the environment around those courageous Australians, those great Australians, like Blair and Josie, who are putting their own money on the line to have a go, to back themselves, to back their product and to back our country. And can I say, this is for all of our agricultural producers out there, and in indulgence, Mr Speaker, particularly to those wonderful women in the gallery today as part of the NFF Diversity and Ag Leadership. That will benefit them. This is the real story of agriculture and the people who will benefit from it.
The member for Franklin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is again to the Acting Prime Minister. When strawberries and public health were under threat, this government pushed through urgent legislation in a single day. Why isn't the government treating the mouse plague, which is threatening farms across 4 states, with any sense of urgency?
The Minister for Agriculture has the floor.
Well, I thank the member for her question, and I think it's important to understand that that was a malicious criminal act. A malicious criminal act. This is a natural occurrence, one which has been happening since the first fleet arrived. And it's important to understand that while this is the state's treatment of responsibility, and I congratulate the New South Wales government for the $150 million investment, the federal government hasn't walked away. We have in fact allowed, I'm sorry, the facts remain that the Australian government has provided farm household allowance to those farmers who are in financial distress. That is the equivalency of the job seeker. That gives them the job seeker rate. That gives them the opportunity to put bread and butter on their table, to take away the stress. The federal government has made that available. In addition, we have also, as part of our efforts to support the New South Wales government in their responsibility in tackling this, the APVMA have approved six emergency permit uses of chemicals. We are currently assessing a further one as we speak at the moment to support New South Wales' efforts in this. And I hear the interjections in the question before about Adam Marshall, the Minister for New South Wales Agriculture. And it was fitting that only yesterday we had a ministerial council meeting of agricultural ministers. Mr Marshall, in fact, did not turn up, and no other minister even raised the mice plague, because there is an understanding and there is an appreciation that this is their responsibility. They are sovereign governments with the responsibility and the resources to deal with it, but we will support them. We will support them with things like farm household allowance, with the APVMA, with the science of the CSIRO to make sure that we can address this, because there will be more mice plagues. There will be more mice plagues. There will be locust plagues. And since Federation, our states have done the job, and the New South Wales government has stood up and done the job. We should congratulate the New South Wales government for getting on with their responsibility, not passing the buck, doing the job, investing in $150 million in solving the problem, partnering with the Commonwealth in the science, but also in us giving the dignity and respect to our farmers in their hour of need.
The member for Barker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology. Will the Minister outline to the House how the Morrison-McCormack government's historic Australia-UK free trade deal will strengthen our economy by delivering more jobs and business opportunities to Australians, especially in the manufacturing sector?
The Minister for Industry, Science and Technology.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And the member is obviously aware that in his electorate, the electorate of Barker, there are more people per capita engaged in food manufacturing than any other electorate in Australia. So the free trade agreement that we have just finalised with the UK is going to mean remarkable things for the people of the member's electorate in dairy, in wine and other food manufacturing, so it's a fantastic thing for the people of the members' electorate. And in general terms for manufacturing in Australia, there's this direct link between the health of exports in manufacturing and the health of manufacturing in Australia and the number of people employed in manufacturing. And in general terms, that has been a very positive story under this government. And what we will see with the FTA with the UK is further growth in manufacturing exports, which will mean further growth in manufacturing and manufacturing jobs in Australia. And to get some concept of the scale of what we're talking about, the value of the goods exported to the UK is presently worth about $9.1 billion. That's $9.1 billion worth of Australian goods exported to the UK. Now, in general terms, our manufacturing sector, last year alone we exported $117 billion worth of manufacturing products, which was about 32% of all of our exports. And in the last 5 years, even accounting for COVID, we had this very strong and steady 3.3% growth every year in our manufacturing exports. And in the March quarter of this year, the value of manufacturing exports increased by a remarkable $400 million. And since coming to government, the prices, so this is the price that our manufacturers get for their exports, has increased by 28.5%. So you've got this very positive story. And then you look at the things that we export to the United Kingdom that are going to have their tariffs reduced. Wine, dairy in the members' electorate, but things like motor vehicle parts, radiators. We export $36 million worth of radiators to the UK. You look at things like hot water heaters, and for anyone who's spent any time in the United Kingdom, there's probably no country on earth that needs Australian hot water heaters more than the United Kingdom, right? I'd probably argue that's foreign aid or a human rights issue for the United Kingdom. If you look at another area of manufacturing exports, it's fashion to the United Kingdom. And if there's any country that needs something even more than Australian hot water systems, it's fashion to the United Kingdom. So our cousins, Mr Speaker, our cousins in the United Kingdom will benefit from our wine, our dairy, our hot water heaters, our fashion, and Australians will benefit from the employment that will generate. And we hear the scoffing from members opposite, but that will mean great fashion, great cheese, hot water for our cousins in the United Kingdom and jobs here.
The Deputy Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. The government announced Australia's 360,000 aged care workers would be fully vaccinated against COVID by Easter. How many aged care workers are yet to receive 2 doses of the vaccine?
The Acting Prime Minister.
I'll ask the Minister for Health to answer that question.
The Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. 100% of residential aged care facilities in Australia have received a first vaccination. 94.9% of residential aged care facilities.
No, the Minister will pause. The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. We're not even 20 seconds in. I'm just going to listen to the Minister for a bit longer. I'm well aware of the detail of the question. The Minister has the call.
94.9% of residential aged care facilities, which includes the vaccination program for aged care workers, have received second doses. In terms of aged care worker vaccinations, there have been 84,414 vaccinations, of which 47,407 have been first doses, 41,007 have been second doses, and in terms of resident vaccinations, we've seen 160,543 residents have first doses, and we've seen 147,879 residents have second doses.
Members on my left. Members on my left. No, members on my left. If you want to ask another question, you can do it when the call returns. The member for Stirling has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry. Will the Minister outline to the House how the Morrison-McCormack's government's historic UK-Australia free trade deal will strengthen our economy by creating more jobs and business opportunities for Australians, and will open new export opportunities for defence businesses, further strengthening our defence industry?
The Minister for Defence Industry has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for Stirling for his question. Always a pleasure to get a question from the member for Stirling, and like to recognise and thank him for his outstanding service to our nation in the ADF. Mr Speaker, this historic FTA with the UK demonstrates our government's commitment to pursuing new and expanded opportunities for Australian exporters and small businesses, especially in our thriving defence industry. The Australian-UK Free Trade Agreement will deliver significant economic benefits, driving strong growth in the value of Australian exports. Opening up export markets is at the core of our government's economic strategy, and we're focused on delivering even greater access to global markets for our defence businesses. Mr Speaker, in 2018 our government launched the Defence Export Strategy, and this strategy paves the way for Australian defence businesses to take advantage of the expanding export opportunities right across the globe. Mr Speaker, when I attended Land Forces last week in Brisbane, I had the great pleasure of meeting with veteran-owned Brisbane-based GuardTech. Now, GuardTech were only founded in 2018, is a small but growing small business. Mr Speaker, GuardTech joined me as part of a Record Team Australia delegation in 2019 in London at the UK Defence Security and Equipment International Trade Show, and it was there that GuardTech secured a $1.7 million contract with the British Army to supply military training systems from Australia. Mr Speaker, it's companies like GuardTech who are taking advantage of the opportunities from our defence export strategy, like participating in team defence delegations and pitching their work to customers overseas, and now they will reap the benefits of this FTA. Mr Speaker, Canberra-based Eclipse, who also attended the 2019 UK DSEI trade show, caught the eye of the UK Ministry of Defence with their groundbreaking military logistics innovations and capabilities. And to Eclipse's surprise, at the conclusion of the trade show, the UK Ministry of Defence literally backed up their truck to their bit of gear that Eclipse had on display, and they purchased their product right there and then. Can you imagine the excitement of Eclipse, some small Australian company showing their wares in the UK? What a sight that must have been. Mr Speaker, Eclipse and GuardTech are just a few examples of the world-class Aussie ingenuity we have at home that are being exported to the UK. Mr Speaker, our government's $270 billion commitment to defence capability is actually buying us much more than just the equipment that our men and women in uniform deserve every day. It's actually buying us credibility abroad, and we will see so many more Australians pitching their equipment and tools to the UK.
The member for Cooper.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. Yesterday, the Aged Care Minister said every aged care worker who wants access to a vaccine right now has access to a vaccine right now. Is the government saying to all those aged care workers who haven't yet been vaccinated, it's your fault?
The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
It's drawing a very long bow, Mr Speaker, from the member who asked that question. And we all have an obligation to talk up the vaccination rates, to talk up the fact that people should get that first jab. We all have an obligation.
Members on my left.
And as the Minister for Health has said, with aged care, all 2,566 RACFs have received a first dose. 2,436 of the 2,566 of Commonwealth RACFs have received a second dose. That is 94.9%. We want everyone to receive a jab. But if some people in aged care, for some reason, it may well be that they have dementia and those decisions are being taken.
Members on my left.
They are being taken by their families, as distressed and worried that they are. There may be people who are in palliative care who may not wish to receive the vaccination. And of course the workers are important too. The workers are important too. And certainly we are making sure that the vaccinations are available, but let's not forget either that it is also a state health public authorities and to be able to...
The Acting Prime Minister will resume his seat. The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Yes, Mr Speaker. On relevance, the question was solely about aged care workers and about whose responsibility is. Mind the Acting Prime Minister, aged care is a federal responsibility.
The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat. Certainly the question was specifically about aged care workers, and I call the Acting Prime Minister and ask him to be relevant to the question.
And we are looking after those workers as well. We are working with state authorities. We are working through the process to get everybody vaccinated. I urge and encourage all Australians to get that jab, get that second jab. So important.
The member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence. Will the Minister please outline to the House how the Morrison-McCormack government's strong relationship with Australia's strategic partners is ensuring stability and prosperity in our region?
The Minister for Defence.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for Boothby for her question, and thank her very much for the support of defence industry in South Australia. It's an incredible sight to behold when you go to Osborne and when you meet with the men and women there, Mr Speaker, and see the work that they're doing in our country's name to keep our country safe and to make sure that our defence personnel have the best equipment possible. Mr Speaker, we are absolutely committed to working with our strategic partners to secure a stable and prosperous future for our region. We want to make sure, Mr Speaker, that we can work with those partners, and this morning I joined defence ministers from the ASEAN group of countries, and we were able to talk about priorities within the region. We were able to talk about upholding the rule of law, making sure that sovereignty was protected. And, Mr Speaker, not only do we have very dear and important partners in our own region, particularly at a time that is uncertain, Mr Speaker, and increasingly uncertain in our region. It's important that we have partners around the world, and the Prime Minister's meeting last night with President Macron from France made clear that France, and I quote, stood by our side amidst increasing tensions in our region. The President went on to say, Mr Speaker, and I quote, "I would like to reiterate how committed France remains to defending the balance in the Indo-Pacific region and how much we consider the partnership we have with Australia to be at the heart of the Indo-Pacific strategy," Mr Speaker. So France understands the increasing threat within our region. So too does Germany, and so too, of course, does NATO. The British Prime Minister has made comments in recent days at Cornwall as well. And, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister had a very significant meeting with the US President as well as the UK Prime Minister, talking about our very long-standing and unshakable alliance between our countries, a friendship that has survived many decades, and one that is more important than ever. We need to make sure that we can continue that cooperation. Mr Speaker, as we know, the United Kingdom's carrier strike group, led by HMS Queen Elizabeth, will be coming to our region shortly, and the ADF is seeking opportunities to engage with the strike group both at sea and with the air wing. Mr Speaker, Australia and her partners are united by our shared values, and we want to make sure that we stand up always for the best interests of our country. And the Prime Minister's visit to Cornwall and to the G7+ and now to France has been invaluable in terms of consolidating those relationships and looking for new opportunities as to how we might continue to work together into the future.
The Deputy Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is again to the Acting Prime Minister. The government announced that all aged care workers would be fully vaccinated by Easter, but the minister just confirmed that only 41,000 of 360,000 workers, or 1 in 9, have been fully vaccinated as of today. Can the Acting Prime Minister explain why this document shows that the tender to allow on-site vaccinations for aged care staff has been extended and now does not close until the end of July?
The Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. That is in fact an additional tender over and above that which was already been in place.
Members on my right.
No. As I mentioned earlier, we have now delivered vaccines to 100% of residential aged care facilities through the four principal providers: Aspen Medical, SOS, Healthcare Australia and Sonic. So all of those four have completed the 100% of first dose vaccination visits and 94.9%. They are currently going through the process of completing the last 5% of that 3 weeks after the first one. In addition, at the request of the sector, we have made sure that there is also the capacity for those sectors which wish, for those firms or facilities which wish to provide vaccinations to their own workers, to give them the opportunity to do that. An example was TLC, which has done that in Victoria. They've done that, I believe, across 13 facilities, and it's one of 5 principal channels that we have for vaccinations of aged care workers. The first of those, of course, has been the provider in-reach. The second, which has been referred to here, is the capacity for individual facilities to do as TLC has done, and a number of
Leader of the Opposition, the Minister for Health has the call.
And a number of providers have sought the capacity to do that, so we have responded to the requests of the providers. In addition to that, this week we announced the $56.75 in-home visitation fee for GPs. Further, there is the capacity for vaccination at general practices or Commonwealth general practice respiratory clinics, and finally there is the capacity for vaccination at state-run clinics. All of those are being used. This was an extension to that which was already in place over and above, and I'm a little bit surprised that the member was not aware of that.
The member for Mallee.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Decentralisation and Regional Education and Minister assisting the Minister for Trade and Investment. Will the Minister inform the House how the Morrison-McCormack government's historic Australia-UK free trade deal will strengthen our economy by delivering more jobs and business opportunities to regional Australia, especially for primary producers?
The Minister assisting the Minister for Trade and Investment.
I thank the member for Mallee very much for her question. She gives voice to the people of Mallee, to country Australia, and is a true champion of the regions. Mr Speaker, when Britain left Australia for the European Community in 1973, it broke a lot of hearts. One of the hearts it broke was that of the late, great Doug Anthony, who became a Republican because of
Members on my left.
But, Mr Speaker, with this new gold standard free trade agreement, Britain is back. It heralds a new era, Mr Speaker, and the benefits for country businesses, primary producers and country communities are absolutely enormous. Now, Mr Speaker, I heard the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson say on the television last night that he was looking forward to more Tim Tams and more Vegemite coming into the UK. Well, Mr Speaker, to that I would say, Prime Minister, you don't know the half of it. The best is yet to come, because we've got Chico Rolls from Bathurst coming your way, Mr Speaker. life is going to get much better. And as the acting Prime Minister knows, Bathurst is the home of the Chico roll. And across country Australia, Mr Speaker, there is excitement about what lies ahead. Woodward Abattoir in the electorate of Mallee is one business that is very excited and delighted about the opportunities that this new free trade agreement brings with it. Mr Speaker, the wine industry is also very excited, and one of the features of this free trade agreement is the immediate elimination of all tariffs on Australian wine. And Mr Speaker, Ben Crossing from Angalong Wines near Orange and Millthorpe in the New South Wales Central West has welcomed this FTA, and he says it's a terrific opportunity to boost wine exports from our region and around Australia. It's great news, and this vitally important market to the Australian wine industry is going to be the better for it. And he gave it 2 thumbs up, Mr Speaker. Thank you, Ben. Now, Mr Speaker, another feature of this FTA is working holiday makers will be able to stay for 3 years with an increase in the age limit to 35 years. And of course, Mr Speaker, with that comes the advent of the ag visa, and it's something that we on this side of the House have been fighting for a long time, and good on the Prime Minister for delivering it when he was over there. The member for Maranoa has been passionate about it, and Guy Gator, who heads up the Horticultural Committee of the New South Wales Farmers, has said this: our industry has been plagued by labour shortages in recent years. We've been fighting for an ag visa for a long time, and I think it's going to be a game changer for the industry as we come out of COVID. If we'd done nothing, we'd have fruit rotting on trees and shortages on supermarket shelves. Mr Speaker, the new era has begun and regional Australia will benefit.
The Minister's time has concluded. The member for Lawler.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Acting Prime Minister. In April, the government announced it would establish 13 dedicated pop-up clinics to vaccinate aged care workers by the end of May. How many of those clinics are operating today, and where are they?
Good question.
The Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. At this point in time, we have 53 clinics, of which 50 are operating in Victoria. They did approximately 120 sites, as Commodore Young made known to the
members on my left.
Made known to the public on Monday. So last week there were, as I say, approximately 120 sites visited from the pop-up roving clinics to which Commodore Young referred. In addition, of course, there are the New South Wales sites, and in addition to that, what we have, as I say, is the complete vaccination in terms of visits to all residential aged care facilities for first doses.
Just pause for a second. The Deputy Manager Opposition Business on a point of order.
On relevance, the Minister knows we're asking about the 13 pop-up clinics promised, of which only 3 are operating, and they're all in Sydney.
Just say the Manager of Opposition Business that when you take a point of order on relevance, you need to say how it's relevant, not provide the answer you'd like the Minister to give. But the Minister for Health has the call, but I do remind you it was a specific question. The Minister for Health.
The correct answer is 53. And correct.
Members on my left.
We have 50 pop-up roving clinics in Victoria, which for some reason the opposition doesn't seem to believe is an important way to vaccinate workers. One of the things, and if I may, Mr Speaker, to put all of this in context, the goal of all of these vaccinations, the goal of all of the policies in Australia is to protect lives. And what we have seen is the world pass 2 million lives lost this year, in 2021, to COVID. The World Health Organisation believes that the real figure is likely 2 to 3 times the official figure. In Australia, in 2021, no person has caught COVID in this nation and died during the course of 2021. We have had one person who developed COVID in quarantine, having had it incubate from having contracted it overseas. But the extraordinary national achievement of not one life lost in this country to COVID at a time of 2 million people officially and probably closer to 5 million people unofficially around the world is one of the most extraordinary public health achievements in Australia's history. And I think that that is something that this nation can reflect upon with immense pride. And yes, there are always challenges, but the fact that we have hit and been able to achieve 100% of aged care facilities where residents have been offered vaccinations, 95% of facilities where second doses have been delivered, and that no Australian, not one Australian, has caught COVID and passed in this country at a time when more than 2 million people worldwide have lost their lives this year, is one of Australia's great public health achievements. And I want to thank all of our workers, our aged care workers, our health workers, our medical workers and our GPs. Together they have saved lives and protected lives on a grand scale.
The member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Will the Minister please outline to the House why improving security at airports and seaports is so crucial for national security and community safety? Can the Minister update the House on the progress of the Morrison-McCormack government's efforts to keep Australians safe?
The Minister for Home Affairs.
Good Minister.
I thank the member for her question and for her long-standing interest in national security matters. Look, every Australian understands that our airports and our seaports as the entry points to our nations are absolutely critical to our national security. They are critical to our efforts to make sure that we are keeping our communities safe and that we are protecting our way of life here in Australia. And there are a number of ways that we are keeping our borders secure. It was just last week that I had the opportunity to meet with some of the hard-working men and women of the Australian Border Force who work in the Torres Strait and do an absolutely outstanding job to keep our borders to the north safe. So I thank you for the work that you have done and the work that I know that you will continue to do to make sure that all Australians are kept safe. Now, it's very well known that this government has always been very strong on border security. We take it extremely seriously. Whether it's managing biosecurity risks during the pandemic, whether it's discouraging people smugglers, or whether it's making sure that criminals can't bring illegal drugs or illegal firearms into this country. Strong border security matters, and as a government, we are committed to making sure that we continue to maintain the strong stance that we have had. Now, Australians know and they understand the very clear position that this government has taken on border security, and they know that this government will always put Australians first. Now, it was a great outcome in the Senate just a couple of hours ago when we were able to finally make progress on the legislation to improve security in our airports and our wharves, with the passage through the Senate of our Transport Security Amendments Serious Crime Bill. Now, it's a sad reality that criminal gangs attempt to use our wharves and our airports to traffic the drugs and weapons that make our communities less safe. And that's the bottom line, and that's why the passing of that legislation through the Senate was so important today. So what it does mean is that those who are working in the most secure areas of our airports and our wharves will have to meet much more stringent checks in terms of links to organised criminal activity. It means that we can protect the professional integrity of the 200,000+ workers at our airports and wharves who do the right thing and take the responsibility of their trusted positions very seriously.
The member for Newcastle.
Mr Speaker, and my questions to the Acting Prime Minister. Aged care residents across Australia were meant to be fully vaccinated by Easter. Is the Minister aware that the Department of Health says there are still 30,000 aged care residents who have not received their second dose? Why has the government left tens of thousands of aged care residents vulnerable to COVID in winter?
The Acting Prime Minister has the call.
I thought I might have got a question about the Newcastle Airport as far as infrastructure. I thought I might have finally got a question about an FTA.
The Acting Prime Minister will resume his seat for a second. The acting Prime Minister, you might only be 8 seconds in, but members on my left, the Manager Opposition Business, I think, can just resume his seat for a second. If you're a short way into the question and you're giving some context to the answer, that's okay, but you can't, no minister can simply start talking about another question they wish they were asked. So the question was actually quite specific with 2 parts, and I invite the acting Prime Minister to resume his answer and be relevant to the question asked.
There is a vaccination rollout, and we are getting on with the job of doing just that, doing it through Commonwealth officials, doing it through state public health officials, doing it for Australia. And I have to say, as the Minister for Health has just indicated in his previous answer, we should be proud as a nation of what we have been able to achieve together to keep Australians safe, to protect lives, to protect livelihoods. We have lost 910 Australians through this global pandemic, and indeed it is a global pandemic. And if you look at what has happened overseas, it is an absolute tragedy. It's a tragedy that we've lost 910 Australians, only one this year, but for their families we mourn with them. We mourn with them, we remember those people. But we have a vaccination strategy. We are rolling out the vaccination, whether it's through aged care facilities for workers, for residents.
Just say to the acting Prime Minister, the information he's giving is certainly context for the question, but I just do need to point out to him he's now quite a way in, and the questions, as I said, were very specific about whether he was aware of certain advice, and another part to the question relating to that about why that was the case. So the acting Prime Minister has given some context, but he needs to address the questions that were asked or wind his answer up.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And to that point, I'm going to ask the Minister for Health to add some figures to my remarks.
The acting Prime Minister, the Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And to answer the member for Newcastle's question, very specifically, 100% of aged care homes have had visits to offer vaccination to residents. 94.9% have already had second doses. There are some residents who, whether it is themselves or their carers, have not provided consent. And this vaccination program is voluntary, and if the member were advocating that it should not be voluntary, then that would be a significant departure. So the correct answer is that 160,543 residents—
The Minister will just pause for a second. The Deputy Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order. Now, hang on. He's raising a point of order. He can do that. I'll hear it and then I'll rule on it. The Deputy Manager of Opposition.
On relevance, the Minister was talking about people not giving consent. What we're talking about is the difference between the number of residents who've had their first dose and the number who've had their second dose. And that difference is 30,000.
No, you won't debate the matter. The Deputy Manager of Opposition Business won't debate the matter. The Minister for— No, he's not going to check his website. He's going to answer the question. The Minister for Health has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Of those residents who've received first doses but not second, there are 13,000 in the last 5%. What the Shadow Minister is mistaking is he's not aware or deliberately not referring to the fact that there are approximately 13.8% of residents who did not accept or were not given consent for or were unable to accept vaccinations during the first time. So, very importantly, 86.2% of residents accepted first doses. But in addition to that, we are also offering those residents who did not accept first doses opportunities through in-reach clinics or through the general practice program, which we announced on Monday of this week, which will empower up to 30,000 general practitioners around the country to visit clinics. So 86.2% of residents have accepted first doses, 100% of facilities have been visited, and within the next short period, 100% of facilities will have had second doses.
The member for Grey.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Regional Health, Regional Communications and Local Government. Will the Minister outline to the House how the Coalition Government is working to ensure all Australians, including those living in regional and remote areas, will have access to the COVID-19 vaccine?
The Minister for Regional Health.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Grey for his question. All Australians, regardless of where they live, can rest assured that they will have access to vaccines, and that's regardless of where they live or how remote they are. And regional Australia has done very well in managing the pandemic. Indeed, as I've said before in this House, probably the safest place on the planet for the last 18 months regarding COVID-19 has been regional Australia. But the vaccines are rolling out. The Acting Prime Minister and the Minister for Health have already mentioned today that 6 million vaccines have been delivered right across Australia. I'm pleased to report that nearly 1.6 million of those have been in the regions and across 1,500 sites. And in regional Australia, we're using a variety of delivery methods. We've got partnerships with state and territory governments, and they're doing a great job in providing clinics, the Royal Flying Doctor Service, community pharmacies, and of course our ever-present and reliable GPs in country areas. And so with regards to the Royal Flying Doctor Service, they're going to deliver to 80 remote locations, 30,000 Australians, and the innovation of that service, they've delivered freezers that can run on the electric supply of those Royal Flying Doctor planes to deliver the Pfizer vaccine to quite remote locations. And indeed, Eucla out on the Nullarbor was the first place to receive that, and not only did the locals turn up, but people travel large distance by aeroplane to actually receive that. I know in the member for Grey's electorate, who represents such a large area of South Australia, the APY lands, Yallatta, Oak Valley, will all receive vaccines delivered by the Royal Flying Doctor Service. But we're also turning to community pharmacy, and last Monday I was in the member for Wright's electorate up at the Terry White's pharmacy at Boona, witnessed the first vaccine delivered in regional Queensland by a pharmacy, and the pharmacies will fill in the gaps where general practice and other facilities might not be available. We'll see that roll out right across Queensland and ultimately in other states as well. And so we encourage all Australians to take up the opportunity. And just in finishing, last week a couple left Victoria and had a very long and in-depth and interesting trip through Western New South Wales, and visited many of the delights right across the member for Riverina's electorate and my electorate. And I've got to say those communities have stepped up, large numbers of people being tested, and as of now, no positive cases. So regional Australians are doing their bit. They're stepping up when they need to, and the federal government is providing a way to make sure that the entire areas of regional Australia are covered by vaccine.
The Minister's time has concluded. The Acting Prime Minister.
That very well answered question. I'd ask that further questions be placed in the notice paper, Mr Speaker.
Thank the